Getting very close here on our numbers, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the monthly HMIS System Administrator and HMIS Lead and System Administrator call. My name is Meredith Allspaw. I use she, her pronouns, and let's get going. Let's start off here with a couple of housekeeping items. Live captioning is available for this webinar. To view or hide the captions, click on the closed caption button on the lower left-hand side of your screen, and click that small arrow beside the closed caption button to select your preferred language. You do have the ability to save the chat from this call once the call is over. So when you want to do that, we will pause at the end of the call to remind you, but to do that, you will go up to the left-hand corner of your toolbar, click on File, click on Save, and then Chat, so that you can save the chat for your reference. We will post all the materials after the call, of course, but if you have something in the chat that you wanted to hold on to immediately, feel free to do so. We also encourage you to give us some feedback, give us suggestions for future topics. You can see there's an email address, hmis@cloudburstgroup.com. We want these meetings to be beneficial for you. We want to know what's bubbling up in your communities, what's relevant, what's timely for you. Please feel free to shoot us an email for a future agenda item. We'd love to hear that from you all. During the call, you'll see that the chat is generally sort of locked down just for sending in chats or questions to the panelists. We do that so that we can manage the 300 to 400 plus different folks on the call and try not to get too overwhelming in the chat. But so we're going to answer questions through the chat, and we have a standard protocol that we use every month. This is not new. But we do want you to put your questions in the chat, and just know that we're copying those out of the chat. Behind the scenes, we are working on answering those questions, getting you the best, most current and relevant information. Sometimes that might take us a little while, but rest assured, we are working on it. It would be very helpful if you would, when asking a question, reference a slide number. Oftentimes you ask a question and the person presenting may not see that question until they're done presenting. And we need to try and remember what you're talking about. So adding in that slide number is super helpful. Again, we will provide answers to all of the questions that we can answer on the call or after the call in written, part of the written products that go out after the call. There may be times though where we have to ask you to submit a question to the AAQ. And that's just because it's too specific, or maybe it needs some further eyes on it from folks not on this call. We just want to make sure, again, that we're getting you the best information that we can. So it's not that we're trying not to answer your questions, trust me. Sometimes we just can't. So you may be asked to put it in the AAQ. You also may not get an answer right away. If we have time after we finish our content, we do try to stay on the line and answer questions so that you can get those. But again, rest assured that you will get the questions and answers after the call. There is a website on the HUD Exchange dedicated to this call. We do post all of the materials. We post the slide decks, we post the Q&A log. That's where the listservs come out of, links for AAQ submission on the HUD Exchange. So please feel free to reference the HUD Exchange for different materials or needs based on HMIS sysadmin calls. Also want to remind you that links for this webinar can be found on Weebly. Your Relly is going to be dropping throughout the call a link to our Weebly page, which will contain all of the different links that are in these slides today. So again, you don't have to wait for the slide deck to come out. You can go access that Weebly link and get all of the links that we reference on the call today. The purpose of this call, again, for those of you that maybe are newer to this call or just need a little reminder, the purpose is to share with you all, HMIS leads, sysadmins. We know we've got COC leads and some other folks on this call. We want to share upcoming data events, information, and changes to guidance. We want to make sure we're providing broad overviews and some foundational knowledge about HMIS. We also want to provide a forum for questions. We do love getting your all's questions during these calls. We also want to remind you all about upcoming reporting deadlines, reporting requirements, and generally just provide leadership for implementation success. We want to see you all be successful in all of the work that you're doing every day. I'm going to kick it over to Fran Ledger from SNAPS to do a bit of an update for us.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that you're here today, spending time with us. You may notice something a little different today. We have Meredith running the show, which I'm very excited about. Thank you so much, Meredith. We have some other transitions that are happening. We have Jesse and Max, who have been on this call for a really long time. Jesse doing the facilitation, and Max more in the background, managing the question pool coming in and the answers. Both Jesse and Max are transitioning to other areas in their career, so I'm very excited for the opportunities that have opened up for them and where they're moving on to. That's kind of the nature of this call being managed by HUD technical assistance providers, as technical assistance providers move on in their career to other things, and new TA providers move into this space, working in this space. So next month, we'll have Sam moving into Jesse's role, and I'm very excited about Sam taking over that facilitation. So excited to see Sam joining us for that. And we have Alexa already taking over for Max. So Alexa's been assisting behind the scenes with the question management, and will continue to do so. We'll take the lead on that. So thank you, Alexa, and thank you, Sam, and thank you, Meredith. And I will turn it back over to Meredith.
Thanks, Fran. So yes, I will try to fill Jesse's shoes today and get us through our call today. Let's talk a little bit about what we are going to cover on the call today. So as per usual, we do have announcements and reminders, and Fran's going to walk us through some of those. So some general sort of welcome, reporting timelines, data events. We've had some questions come in about what happens in an administration change. So Fran's just going to spend a couple minutes talking about that. We're also going to talk a little bit about the updated TA strategy to improve data and performance, the overview that was released. We are going to do a deeper dive on NHSDC, do a little bit of a debrief there. We've got some guests, Victoria and Juliana, that are going to be talking about the HMIS CSV and access to the HMIS CSV, as well as LSA submission and flags for FY 2024. You will also then get to hear a lot from me today about an upcoming release of an HMIS report. We're going to talk a little bit about a new vendor validation process, as well as preview the changes that are coming for the FY 2026 HMIS data standards. We're going to go back to Fran and talk about why some questions are submitted to the AAQ versus HUD directly. And then Ureli is going to wrap us up with our Did You Know section of today's call, talking a little bit about how to assess your HMIS software and vendor. Again, sort of our recurring cast of characters on this call. We've got Fran, you just saw them. We have Sam Kamiyama, she, her, Ureli Salgado, she, her, Miriam Carlone, who is managing all of this today, she, her. As Fran mentioned, we have Alexa Temrick on the background answering and triaging questions, she, her. From ICF, we have Alyssa Parrish, she, her. Myself, again, I am Meredith Alspaugh from the Partnership Center. I use she, her pronouns. And then our special guests, Juliana Shuto, she, her, and Victoria Lopez, she, her, both from Apt Global. Okay, so now I'm going to kick it back to Fran to do some announcements and reminders.
So I usually run through this section fairly quickly, and so I'm covering quite a few things before we get into the kind of deep part of the content. This first slide that you see up here, if you're new to this call, or if you come every time and you're well versed in your job, but there's areas in which you might want to brush up on. These are some things that we want to make sure everybody is aware of, that they exist. These are some basic foundational things that everyone who's working in the homeless management information system space should understand that they exist and can access these resources. They're very helpful. So, you go ahead and take a look at those when you have a chance. The slide deck will be available and you'll be able to access this set of links. This contains all of the foundational stuff and the updated SNAPS technical assistance strategy, so you can get a kind of view of the direction that the SNAPS office is looking at as far as putting out technical assistance support materials for communities to be able to improve the things that you're doing locally. Okay, let's look at our reporting timeline. We break this up looking at monthly, quarterly, and annually. So SSVF reports are December 1st through the 7th. And then for our quarterly reports, we have YHDP round 4, 5, 6, and 7. That's due January 30th. We have runaway homeless youth. That's going to be January 20th through the 31st. And the special NOFO quarterly report is January 30th. Annual stuff we have underway is the LSA, right? That's opened, and we're hoping final submission date to be January 9th. That's the anticipated date. And then we have special NOFO annual report that is going to be due December 29th. PATH annual report is September 16th through December 16th. And then SPMs, we anticipate that's going to open up in February 2025. So those are the dates you'll have access to those also. Let's go ahead and talk about the data standards. So what we're trying to do is get community feedback for proposed changes for the HMIS data elements. And we're requesting this feedback through May 31st, 2025. And there's various ways in which you can give us feedback. And we've covered this on previous slides, and we'll continue to cover this. So you can either do the survey, very simple form to go through and provide feedback. If you have a lot to tell us and you've constructed a narrative about things that you think should be improved in the data elements, you can send it by email. And you can do it to hmis@hud.gov or attend office hours that we have. And we have an office hours today where we'll be covering the HMIS data standards. Let's go on to the next slide. So what are the things that are coming up around the HMIS data and performance space? So there's a system modeling and Stella M monthly office hours. This is a regular call, so you can see the date there, third Thursday of the month. And then we have data standards engagement. This is a really important call that's coming up today at 3 p.m. Eastern. And this is really to help communities better engage local folks on getting feedback around the data elements. So then you can submit something to HUD around what you'd like to see. The PIT office hours, December 6th, and LSA office hours, December 10th and January 6th. There's an ongoing SNAPS call. It used to be that we had, pre-COVID, we had COC calls. We didn't have dedicated time in there for data and performance. Then we had the COVID office hours that were regular calls. Now we've gone and we're starting to transition to ongoing SNAPS calls, but we've done a carve out for data and performance. So you may be interested in attending those SNAP calls that have like a wide range of folks attending, but every call will have some kind of data and performance content in it, probably around 10 minutes or so of content. Let's go to the next slide. So NHSDC is coming up in the spring. It's April 28th through the 30th. HUD will have content at that along with communities. If you are attending, you may want to register early. There is a huge event that's going on in New Orleans at the same time, so booking early would be helpful. Registration is open at the NHSDC website, and they're also accepting proposals right now. I think through December 6th. So you can go to the website and check on that date. But I highly recommend communities consider submitting a proposal. It's really beneficial to get like a wide range of sessions from communities to see what, share, what communities are doing. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Some of you might be aware that we're going to go through an administration change in the federal government. And so I just wanted to stick a slide in here to just say, this is nothing new for HUD. We go through this at a regular cadence, as you know. And so just like in past changes in administration, we're going to do it again. We have some core foundational things that we do, that we continue to do. It's a continuity of work that we do, regardless of the administration change. When administrations come in, every administration has its own kind of interested things that it wants to do, some very specific policy stuff or initiatives, and that may be layered onto the work that we do. But we have core work that we do. People are experiencing homelessness before the new administration comes in, when the administration comes in, and when it goes out. Our business is to make sure that we are serving people and getting them housed, and so that will continue to be our focus. And so, just continue to know we're here and we're doing the business that we've always been doing and we will continue to do. With that, I'm going to turn it over to, I think that's the last slide I have. I think I'm going to turn it over at this point. I think it's going to go to Alyssa.
That is me. Thank you so much, Fran. Hi, everyone. We have talked about this a few times prior to its release on the HUD Exchange, but the updated TA strategy is really out there now. So the updated TA strategy to improve data and performance overview has been released, and a listserv went out, I think, a couple weeks ago. This is really an overview version of the strategy. There will be a more comprehensive version available at a later time. Just want to remind folks that this is a TA strategy. TA is in the title, and that really does mean that it focuses on how technical assistance and support provided by TA is aligning and coordinated around the focus areas to really support communities. So the focus areas identified in the strategy include data capacity, data collection, data quality, and data utilization. And as communities dig into the strategy, there is an email address that is directly in the strategy towards the end where feedback can be submitted. So that HMIS@HUD.gov email address can be leveraged. You can email it with feedback about the strategy itself. The overview includes, it's formatted in such a way that it includes a definition of each priority area, the goals for each priority area, a summary of what the priority is and why it's important in addressing and ending homelessness, expectations for key partners related to each priority area, and then expectations that identify beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels for each priority area. We are really excited this strategy is publicly available, and we will continue to leverage it to align our TA efforts and supports for you all. And we will be developing tools and resources to support the strategy. I think being more transparent about how the strategy is supporting the TA efforts and the products that are released around data and HMIS. And we will also include some monitoring processes to ensure that the strategy is supporting both TA and communities in the way that we are anticipating. So that is out there in the world. Take a look if you haven't yet. We have also talked about this topic a few times over the last several months. So since about February of this year, the Data Lab has been working with HMIS vendors on data exchange and interoperability standards, specifically around API development, and that's been done in partnership with HUD and US Digital Services, in addition to community conversations and conversations here. We do have an API reference that we are considering in pre-release mode, so it's actually called 0.1.0-beta to be really clear that this is in pre-release mode. This API reference does support key partners in understanding the expectations that HUD has going forward and what an API can do in an HMIS as kind of a baseline to be able to exchange data in live time with other systems. Although it's in beta version, the structure that has been built through the API reference is pretty comprehensive and supports vendors in building out APIs in their specific systems. Additionally, the data lab has provided an API sandbox for vendors to test their endpoints and includes all functionality as identified in the reference. I will just mention that we have heard the concerns about the delete endpoint specifically, and we are continuing to talk through that with both the vendors and HUD. As the vendors leverage the sandbox to ensure that personally identifiable information or PII is not uploaded into the sandbox, there are parameters set to deny any data set that does not include middle names being set to test. So we have put safeguards in there to ensure that PII is not used in the sandbox. And I think I'm going to kick it over to Meredith for Data Privacy Security Toolkit.
Yes. So those of you that were at NHSDC, you have heard this, or maybe if you were listening in on the streamed session, you've already heard this, but we did want to make sure that we shared that the HMIS Data Privacy Security Toolkit is now available on the HUD Exchange. This is not necessarily new information. It is a suite of resources, though, that is consolidating and clarifying existing guidance. It's really also a suite of materials that are designed to promote a collaborative approach to data sharing. So addressing common questions around data sharing with health, police, and other external entities. Really, you know, we say to you all a lot, we know this, like, you should seek legal advice for this, or, you know, you should handle it in this way. This suite of materials, there's a product in here that goes a little deeper with some really suggested language, some suggested questions for like working with an attorney or something like that. So again, so this packet, this suite of materials goes beyond sort of minimum compliance and tries to get a little bit deeper into some of the really sort of hot topics around data and privacy security. Next slide, please. There are, 7 resources in total. Some of them have been posted. These links are all in that Weebly. There is the privacy and security introduction. There's also getting started with HMIS data sharing and integrating people with lived experience of homelessness in the data sharing process. So we're really excited about that material. We also have an HMIS data uses and disclosures document that is in production right now and should be coming out very soon. There is the HMIS and privacy compliance review, working with an attorney to achieve compliance. And this is one, I think, again, I think they're all very helpful resources. So this is one I think is very helpful, again, because we say, you know, this is a local COC decision. Often we get questions about signed consents, right, or releases of information. And we say, HUD doesn't require, you know, a signed thing, or HUD doesn't require this. That's a local decision. This will really help you, hopefully, with working with your attorney, knowing what to ask them, how to have them help you, I suppose. So that's a cool document that's out there. And then there are 2 others that are coming soon as well, working with law enforcement, or dealing with data requests for law enforcement, health threats, and domestic violence scenarios. And then also working with outside health partners. Some really good information in there around sharing information with health partners. We address the, you know, ever-present issue around HIPAA compliance. So some cool resources there. Keep an eye out on that page for those updates when they're coming. Back to you, Alyssa.
Thank you. We are going to go into our deep dives content, and I'm going to do our NHSDC debrief from October, which all NHSDC feels like forever ago, but it was just a little less than a month ago, and it was October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. And some of the summary overall trends that we're seeing is that we do continue to see a lot of new folks at NHSDC conferences, which makes sense given its content and the focus of the conference. We love seeing everyone and getting to know new people in this field. It's really great to be able to connect with y'all in real life. HUD's opening plenary this time around really centered communities. So there was a random selection process that occurred prior to the conference. We got the registration list and it was a random selection. Outreach was done to 4 random attendees, and those 4 attendees spoke during the opening plenary and were able to share whatever they wanted to share about the work they're doing locally to address and end homelessness, which really provided diverse perspectives and dialogue from those communities. They were truly random and had a lot of really great things to share. HUD also reminded attendees about the fiscal year 2027 data standards process and the different ways to provide feedback that Fran mentioned earlier. The sessions that HUD sponsored were live streamed as they have been for the past few years, and the recordings and slides will be posted to the HUD Exchange. We are already preparing for spring 2025. So as Fran mentioned earlier, the conference will be April 20th through the 30th, or 28th through the 30th in New Orleans. And yeah, book early because of that Jazz Fest. So we do thank you for the feedback that you provide on the sessions. We do remind folks during the presentations to submit their feedback because we do review that feedback and use it to support our continuous quality improvement process and to help select sessions moving forward. This is a quick summary of the feedback for the HUD and HSDC sessions. So the average number of responses that we received was 25 with a maximum of 29 and a minimum of 8. The average ratings for the different sessions are along the right here, and the maximum score for any of them was 5. So Eva did get a perfect score because she's great. And that's the recap or summary of the HUD sessions. We also, we saw some really great feedback coming in for the community sessions as well. We know those are pretty fabulous and diverse and really gives communities the opportunity to connect with each other, hear about the things that are happening at the local level. So those are really great opportunities. Communities are doing some really great work. NHSDC is accepting proposals for the spring conference right now. They are due December 6th, so in a couple of weeks here. They did request submissions for specific topic areas, which are listed below, these emergency management, technology solutions, target or specific populations, and then the narrative changes. But they are also accepting proposals for any topic. So that is what I have for fall recap and spring. And I think I am handing it over to Victoria.
Victoria is going to take it from here.
Thanks. Okay, so I have a little bit to talk about user access to the HMIS CSV. So this is just a PSA, a reminder that EVA specifically is designed for use by HMIS administrators. Oh, I don't think I have the ability to.
Alyssa, can you make Victoria? There we go.
There we go. Thanks. All right, so just to refresh folks' memory, to utilize EVA, a user has to have access to a hashed HMIS CSV file. So while hashing does obscure some personal identifiers in the CSV, the file is not de-identified. So it still contains personal identifying information. It contains client level data. So we have heard from some HMIS admins, you have mentioned that your providers are able to run HMIS CSVs in your HMIS and that they access EVA directly, right? For purposes of like data quality, for example. So that's not expressly prohibited, but we want you to make sure that, if that is happening, that users are not able to export data that they are not permitted to see, and that all uses of data are disclosed to clients. So another part of this for folks to consider, why is this so important? Why are we making a big deal about this? The HMIS CSV export contains all HMIS data elements, which means that any user who can generate that export can do it and then walk away with a file that is basically, a copy of your HMIS. And so the risk of unnecessary user access, being able to download that HMIS CSV, it's a huge risk. So our ask for y'all is to please train your end users, whoever they may be, about the difference between an HMIS CSV and an aggregate CSV, such as an APR. And just, be careful and be thoughtful and mindful of who has access to this specific export. That said, I'm going to pass it off to Juliana and let me know
Victoria.
if you'd like me to move on.
Yeah, you can. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have all very likely seen this calendar before, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. The first is these internal benchmarks. These are, or interim benchmarks. These are guidelines, like guideposts for COCs to help guide you through the LSA data cleaning process. These benchmarks aren't deadlines, and you won't be penalized for not meeting these interim benchmarks. But we encourage you to do your best to try to meet them as a way to stay on track for that January 9th deadline. So I'm just going to briefly go over these benchmarks. So November 13th, that has passed. We encouraged all COCs to have had a successful upload of an official HUD review file. And we'll show you the numbers in the next slide, but the vast majority of COCs hit this benchmark. The next interim benchmark is December 12th. That's coming up. By this date, COCs should have at least one successful upload and submitted their data set for review, which means that they have inputted detailed and comprehensive notes to address their warning flags. So we'll talk more about that later also, but since this process is iterative, we expect that COCs will go back and forth with the review team to resolve any issues in their data sets before the end of the data cleaning and review period. So you're certainly encouraged to submit for review if you do have notes in your flags before that December 12th benchmark, if you can. Entering your notes by December 12th gets you more likely to get notes back before the holiday break period, which is in gray. That'll start on, well, I'll talk about those in a second, but the more COCs submit at once, the longer it'll take for your review teams to respond to them. So we do encourage you to try to get your notes in as early as possible. So for example, if all 300 plus COCs submit their data sets for review on December 12th, it's possible that not everyone would get their notes back before the holiday break period. But if you're kind of working your way up to that December 12th deadline, you're submitting, you're writing notes, you're submitting for review, we're reviewing them, we're sending them back to you. If it's more of this iterative process a little bit at a time, we're much more likely to be able to turn around notes in a quick enough time period. So I'll just talk briefly about these holiday break periods. The data review team will not be monitoring the regional inboxes during these breaks. So coming up, it's November 27th through 29th. And then in December, it'll be the 23rd through January 1st. We won't be monitoring the inboxes, and any questions can be directed to the AAQ desk, and there'll be automatic replies from the regional inboxes as a reminder to folks that do reach out. It's possible that your review team might be working during these holiday break periods, but just as kind of a blanket statement, assume that you won't get a response, but if you do, it'll be a happy surprise. The deadline for the LSA is Thursday, January 9th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our next slide to show you where we're at as of this morning in these COC statuses. So the vast majority of COCs are right on track with the timeline that we just went over. There are 44 COCs who haven't started, 7 who haven't been able to upload their data in HDX, so that's this rejected number, but over 330 COCs have successfully uploaded and are now entering notes in their data, and some of those have even submitted or have gone through a couple review cycles with their data review team, as in submitted and then goes back to need COC review, back to submitted. So we're happy to see these numbers, and we really appreciate the COC's efforts to get us here. So I want to talk about what happens next once you're in this needs COC review. So I'll go to the next slide. And this is just a reminder about submitting. So like we said, most COCs are in that needs COC review status. So that is an indication for COCs to go through their data and try to minimize any errors and address any warnings that are appearing in their data. So this might mean making changes in your HMIS and replacing your LSA data with an updated data set, in addition to providing detailed and comprehensive notes on warning flags explaining the data. So once a COC has gone through some or all of their notes and is ready for our data review team to review and respond to their notes, the LSA submitter must click this Submit for Review button. It's highlighted in red, but it's on the right-hand side of your screen, and that will put their data set in the review team's court to review. The data review team is expected to take about 2 business days to review COC notes in their warning flags, but like I said before, this might take longer if there's a really large volume of COCs submitting at once. So as always, we encourage you to submit as early as possible. Once a data set is submitted, you can't add additional notes to your data set until it's returned to the COC's court after reviewing. In the data set on the screen, you can see that they have added notes to 57% of their warning flags. So that was like they have 14 flags, they have 14 warning flags, and 8 of them they have written notes for. The COC at this point is more than welcome to submit for review if they're at a good stopping point, even if some of their flags remain without notes. Or a COC can also choose to wait until all 14 of these flags have responses and notes to them before submitting for review. So once you've successfully uploaded your data in HDX and you enter notes for your warning flags, your LSA submitter needs to submit the data set for review by clicking that Submit for Review button on the far right. You only submit your data set for review when you're ready for your data review team to look over and react to the notes that you've left in your data on your warning flags. If you submit for review without any notes, your review team will simply turn it back to Needs COC Review to let you know that it's still in your court and you just need to add notes to your flags. And you're welcome to add notes, like I said before, to some flags, but not others, and submit knowing as long as you keep in mind that you won't get to add additional notes until your review team puts your data set back in Needs COC Review. So that was a recap. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide, and I have a list of resources. These are just going to help guide you through the LSA process. I don't need to go through all of them, but I'll just direct your attention that Common Flags Library has over 150 errors and warnings. There's common causes, how to resolve them. The guidance on common data quality issues is like a compilation of issues the LSA team has come across over the years and is a great resource to help you troubleshoot issues. Victoria in a moment will talk about Weebly, but I just wanted to include it on this list in case you're using this as a reference. But that has up-to-date information about current and resolved issues that come up in HDX. Something I do want to mention is the LSA submission guide. The HUD Exchange still has the 2023 version. So although the timeline is not correct in that version that's posted, the guidance on how to upload, how to change contacts, and how to get you through the first few weeks is still relevant and useful, and especially for those who are having who haven't started or have a rejected upload, this might be a good resource for you. And then we also have LSA office hours that we discussed a little earlier, but there's we've had 2 and we'll have 2 more. These are sent out through the regional inboxes, so please reach out to your regional inboxes if you haven't received an invitation but would like to attend. And slides, recordings, and Q&A documents are also posted on the HUD Exchange. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. And then I'm going to turn it over to Victoria.
Thanks, Juliana. I do want to address verbally one question that came in while you were talking about the submission process. So Kayla asks if we have added notes but then replace the upload, will the notes need to be recopied for the flag status to show the reviewer that there are notes available for them to review? The answer is no. You may find that, let's say you upload your LSA file, you have 10 flags, you make a note on each of those flags, and so the status changes. COC made a note. If you replace the upload, you might see that some of those statuses change automatically if the data underlying those flags have changed. So you might see that the flag status changes to data have changed. That before you submit, I do believe it is worth going in and looking at the changed data in the flag to see if your note is still relevant, if it makes sense, or if there needs to be some additional context added before you submit it. But there's no need for folks to recopy the same note that they left on a replaced upload just for a flag status. Your LSA review team will be able to figure out which ones have notes and which ones need to be responded to.
Sorry, Victoria, one quick reminder. It's really important because of what Victoria just explained to replace your upload and don't delete your upload and then re-upload. Just use that replace upload button so that the data stays within, and the data and your notes kind of stick with your data set. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that caveat. That's important. Okay, so let's talk about some of the current and resolved flag issues. So as was mentioned near the top of the call, you can see current and resolved issues on Weebly. We have also added a link to the Weebly site in the LSA module. So when you log into HDX and you mosey on over to the LSA page, you should see that blue banner kind of up at the top, front and center with the Weebly link. So it's available for folks right now. One thing that I wanted to touch on before getting into the actual flags themselves, some COCs have mentioned that the status note required has been populating when there is actually a note present. So there were a series of data sets that were reprocessed on Saturday to address the HIC flag issues in order to resolve them. The data sets that got reprocessed, those are the ones who are reporting note required, even when a note is there. No action is needed, so kind of like piggybacking off of what I was saying before, add notes where they are needed and then submit for review as you normally would, and those are just going to get resolved status-wise, right? As your data team marks those flags with new notes. And they'll update the status on their end. So if you happen to be in this boat, you've made, you've entered your notes on these flags and you're seeing note required, you don't have to go in and like recopy your notes or anything. You can just submit as is if you are ready for review. Okay, so let's talk about the flags that have been resolved, because there have been, I believe, a series of 3 that were resolved as of last Friday. So the first is the series of flags 906 through 922. These flags were displaying 0 beds for the 2023 and 2024 HIC variables. Those flags are now accurately populating HIC bed count variables. So please follow the standard procedure for reviewing flags, either leave notes confirming the data or make any fixes needed in HMIS to resolve the error and then re-upload your LSA reports. In a similar vein, so flags 1139 through 1195, those flags I think are every COC's nightmare. They're the ones that compare HIC and LSA inventory. And previously they were not triggering at all, but as of the fix that went in on Friday, they are now triggering. No re-upload is necessary, right? This is kind of what triggered that reprocessing for some COCs. You may now see some additional flags in your LSA flag report. Again, just follow the same standard procedure for reviewing the flags, either leave notes confirming the data, make any fixes needed in HMIS to resolve the flag, and then re-upload your LSA report. I do want to note that for this series of flags in particular, I anticipate that even if you are getting these flags, it should not be very many, right? Because this is the first year where we are comparing HIC data from the HDX from the data that was uploaded into HDX. And so like the assumption is that HIC inventory and your LSA inventory should match, provided that there have been no updates to the inventory in your HMIS since the upload of the HIC into HDX. And there may have been, but I just want to throw that out there because we have gotten some comments and feedback from COCs who are concerned about like the number of flags that they're seeing in this range. But I think that is a result of having data that really just more closely aligns because it's being pulled from the exact same source, right, from your HMIS. All right, and lastly is flag 808. So this flag was triggering erroneously for some COCs. It indicated that the geography type was incorrect for certain zip codes when it actually was correct. Now, the tech team did update the geography type zip code crosswalk in HDX, and that's based off of HUD's most recent updates to the data standards geography file. Again, that was fixed last Friday. If you have not replaced your upload since then, this might be a time to push it through or do a replacement upload if you're ready for that, to see if you're getting some of these flags, if they knock off. All right, let's talk about a few of the ongoing issues. So one of them is flag 1340. It's triggering for rapid rehousing supportive services only projects that ended before the report period began. So in the affiliation file, in your LSA export, it's only supposed to pull in rapid rehousing services only projects that do have a residential affiliation if it was active during the report period. Now, the way that the current flag logic works is that this flag will trigger when there is no data in the affiliation CSV file. But you may have rapid rehousing services only projects in the project CSV file that have a residential affiliation, but the flag does not take into consideration a project's operating end date. So, for example, we had the COC that originally reported this, their rapid rehousing services only project ended a day before the report period started. And so the affiliation CSV correctly was empty. Since the project was not active during the report period, we wouldn't expect any project data to be in that affiliation file. But the flag triggered anyways because it does not take into account the project's operating end date. So users may, if you're getting this flag and you think that this is a problem, one way to check is that you may see the variables table in this flag is just blank. It's completely null. And so it might be even difficult to tell which projects are implicated in the flag. If you are seeing that, reach out to your review team, email your regional inbox, and we will take a look. But the tech team is working on a fix and update to this flag logic. So just to reiterate, this is not like a vendor issue. We're pretty sure that this is a flag issue. Okay, there is still an ongoing issue with flag 780. It is triggering for other permanent housing type projects. Enrollment data that is associated with OPH projects, it should be excluded from the LSA. But what we're finding is that some COCs have this OPH enrollment data in their LSA calculated file, and it shouldn't be there. At this time, COCs don't need to take action on this flag if the project that is indicated in the flag, if it is an OPH project, where the tech team is working with vendors to get this resolved. And so I do anticipate that this will be resolved fairly soon. All right, and then the last issue here is for flags 10,003 through 10,000. Gosh, I can't read numbers. 1,003 through 1,031. So the percentages in these utilization warning flags, they're not displaying correctly. So what you might see here is that the flag variables table displays the utilization rate as a proportion. So you might see like 0.43. But the flag description displays the proportion as a percentage without proper conversion, right? So we would expect the flag description to be 43%, but instead it's reporting it as 0.43, so like less than a percentage point. There are a few flags in this range, 1008, 1014, 1020, and 26 that are not impacted by this. All right, that is my updates on resolved and current LSA flag issues. Encourage everyone to continue to reach out to their LSA liaison and reviewer if you suspect any issue with a flag, and we will make sure to investigate and then reach back out if we have any more questions or next steps for y'all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria and Juliana. There are quite a few questions I saw rolling in. So those of you that have asked questions, please be assured that they will be answering those. If time permits, maybe we can come back, and if there's any that need to be addressed verbally, we can do that. But we do want to make sure that we get through the rest of our content today. So let's keep going here. Let's talk about a new thing that is coming out, a new report that is coming out. And it is an HMIS APR summary report. So what this is a report about all of the HMIS APRs that you all, or your HMIS leads, your COCs, have submitted or did submit in fiscal year 2022. So it's an effort that has been underway for quite a while to do some analysis on all of the data that you all are submitting in those APRs, right? I think HUD talks about this a lot. We talk about this a lot, like, don't collect the data if you're not going to use the data, right? So we want to use the data. We want to use the information that you all have submitted in these APRs. So we are releasing reports. It should be hopefully out on the HUD Exchange in the next day or two. If not this week, early next week, you will get a listserv about the report. And what the report does is really goes through information about HMIS across the country. So it is covering information about implementation types and coverage. So we can get a sense of, you know, how many multi-COC implementations are there? How many statewide implementations are there? What software and vendors are in use? What does coverage look like for all of these different providers across the country? We break down market share information in here about where all of the, which COCs rather are using which software. We get into the costs of HMIS, because again, in the HMIS APRs that you all are submitting, there is financial information. So really giving us an opportunity to look at what HMIS costs, who's doing what with HMIS, who's using which software. Lots of information about HMIS across the country. The report also includes a handful of recommendations to HUD for ways to support HMIS implementation. Again, this is a report it's a long time coming, right? So we're using FY 2022 data. Some of the recommendations you'll see are being implemented. There's a recommendation around standardizing data exchange, what Alyssa's been talking about. There's a recommendation in there about vendor validations. So there's going to be some information that is coming up here just after this section about vendor validations. That's a recommendation of that report. So we do encourage you all to read the report, to review the report. We do not want you to read the report and think, oh no, we should change vendors. Oh no, we need to make these big sweeping changes. That's not the intention of the report. It's really just to share information. It's to make folks aware of what HMIS looks like, implementations look like across the country. So we're really excited that this is coming out. We will potentially talk more about it in future calls. But again, you will see a listserv in the coming days, and we would strongly encourage that you go take a look at this report. So let's talk now about vendor validation. This is a really cool new thing that we are doing that HUD is implementing with the data lab using Sage to validate a vendor's report output. We really want to document that vendors' software can produce a version of an APR and a caper that meets HUD's programming requirements. Another purpose of this process is to inform COCs and HMIS leads about the status and availability of a validated report to you all. So there will be a public sort of aspect to this process where we will have a list on the HUD Exchange that will identify which software and which version of their software for the vendors specifically, which vendors have validated their APR and CAPR results using the testing upload portal and Sage that will be just for vendors. We're really hoping that this will improve the quality of APRs and CAPRs that get submitted in Sage so that we have better data quality. You know, we're always looking at improving data quality. So here's an opportunity to see that we are really improving the quality of these reports that are being submitted in Sage. This process is an opt-in process. I think I say that again in the next slide here, but it's an optional process for vendors at this point. There is a testing upload portal that will go live for vendors in 2025. We have had conversations with the vendors. They know this is coming. It's not a surprise to anyone. They're all quite excited about it, I think. And so this is something that will go live in January. You can expect to see results sometime in early 2025. I'm not sure exactly when, but they will be able to get in there and start doing their validation testing in 2025. Again, this is an opt-in process. HUD is not requiring vendor participation. Again, though, we've heard pretty positive feedback from the vendors, so I would anticipate a high level of participation from the vendors. Essentially, what we're doing here is giving the vendors an upload portal in Sage that tests their APR and CAPR CSV files against a stricter set of validation requirements. So if any of you have interacted with Sage in any way, which I think probably all of you have, you know there are some validations that are in place for Sage, but they're pretty high level. They're not super, they're not testing every row, they're not validating all of the sums and totals, just really kind of basic validation requirements. This takes it a level sort of deeper. Vendors will be required to do these validation tests on all project types for both APRs and CAPRs. They're also being asked to do a new validation test anytime there's a new report version released. So at the point the data standards are updated or any other software update that's initiated by the vendor that may impact their reporting, right? HUD doesn't know, we don't know every time a software gets updated. And not all software updates necessitate a retesting, but we are looking to the vendors to, you know, to test their uploads when they need to retest their reports when they make a big change in their system that may impact the quality of the report. I see a question I want to tackle really fast too. Comparable databases, yes, we are. This is targeted to both HMIS vendors and comparable database vendors. So part of the work that the Data Lab does, right, they're working with all of the different vendors, comparable databases and HMIS vendors. They've all been invited to participate in this process. So talking a little bit here about what's actually being validated. We found in some different analysis of data in Sage that there may be, you know, a column worth of data and there are subtotals and then there are totals at the end. And we found that the numbers just weren't adding up. And so we didn't know which numbers were right. We didn't know if a subtitle was right. We didn't know if the total was right. So there's lots of potential areas for calculations to be done incorrectly. And so that's what we want to test. So it's a little, the colors are maybe a little hard to see here, but the total totals, the red cell here, of each table and all the testable calculations that should be calculated correctly within the table. That's what we're testing. So right now we test against Q5A, the validation table, right? So that total down there, that 15, gets validated against the Q5 total number of clients served. That's a standard validation that will continue to exist. But what we're also doing is calculating now, or validating rather, that the totals above that match. So you can see you've got exit destination A, B, and C. That should equal 9. If that doesn't equal 9, that will trigger a flag. Similarly, you know, in the next section, D and E should equal 6. If that doesn't, that's going to trigger a flag. Similarly, then, when you go across the different columns, we would expect that those sums would also equal the subtotal, right? So if you have a subtotal of 6, we would expect to see some breakdown of the households with children, without children, and with only children. That should equal 6. or whatever that number is. So if those numbers are not in balance, that's going to be where the new testing upload portal will flag those issues for vendors so that they can go back to their code and take a look at what how they've got the report programmed and how what corrections they maybe need to make in there. So we're very excited about this process. We're really excited about the transparency that we're hoping will bring, the accountability that this will bring to the process, so that you all know that your vendors have tested their reports against this process, against this super validator, if you will, in Sage, just to continue to improve the reliability of the data that we're getting. We do use that Sage data, so we want to make sure it's as accurate as possible. And I'm sure we will talk more about this moving forward, but this is what's happening in early 2025. Okay, I'm gonna keep going here. So now let's talk about HMIS data standards preview. And I should have been more explicit on this slide and say specifically we're going to talk about fiscal year 2026 data standards. So as a reminder, for those of you that have been around this for a while, we typically do data standards changes every 2 years. We've been on that cadence for a while now. We last did a major update in 2024. HUD determined that after the release of that update in 2024, they didn't want to do another one immediately. They didn't want to do a big major one in another 2 years. We wanted to take a little more time and think about some of the bigger changes, get more community feedback, more community engagement in the process. So HUD and their federal partners decided to hold off on any major changes until 2027. Now, that being said, we knew there were some things that had to be corrected or had to be updated in 2026. But we certainly were not trying to go back to this cadence of every year doing major data standards changes. So we set some parameters, HUD again and the federal partner sort of set some parameters about what kinds of changes would be considered for fiscal year 2026. So on the screen here, you can see what kind of changes we considered. Clarifications to data collection guidance, corrections to data collection guidance, urgent changes that were needed for regulatory or statutory needs, a major change that was narrow in focus. So for instance, if a federal partner required a new data element, we would entertain that. And then other changes that were low impact on system administrators and HMIS end users. So again, we did not want to do 2 major data standards updates right in a row, right on top of each other. So we really tried to keep these FY 2026 changes to a minimum. So what we're going to do, I'll walk you through then what we're looking at for FY 2026. The federal partners and HUD have reviewed and approved all of these changes. We are very much in the process of doing documentation updates. We'll talk about the timeline again here in a few minutes, but this is where we've landed with changes. So there will be a few changes in the project descriptor data elements. We are retiring a couple of funding sources. This should come as no surprise. ESG-CV and HOPWA-CV funding sources will be retired. Those will no longer be applicable. We are adding the new HUD COC builds funding source. So all of the dictionary and manual and whatnot will be updated with that new funding source. And we're going to do an update to a federal partner program specific data element for RIE. So those of you that are familiar with R13, which is the RIE family critical issues, as it stands currently, it's only yes and no responses. And RIE indicated that they really needed more information than just yes and no. So we are adding in the standard 8999 answers, right? Client doesn't know, client prefers not to answer, and data not collected. I'm really hoping then that this will help RIE get the information that they need for their reporting purposes. We're making another update on another federal partner program specific data element for the VA. So this is specific to V3, financial assistance for SSVF. Some of you, I think, have encountered this challenge. This is an issue that has really come to light in reporting in the SSVF reporting repository, where the dates aren't working for the VA. They need different dates about when financial assistance is being provided. So they need an information date in addition to the start data for the financial assistance and the end date of the financial assistance. Please note, this is not the entire element snip on the screen here. I just wanted to capture that top part of it so that you all could see what we're talking about and where this addition would go. So there will be a new field with an information date that is in addition to the other dates that are already currently in that data element. The VA also has a brand new element. So as I mentioned, adding a new element is generally a pretty major change. But we had to make that kind of change because it is a statutory requirement for the VA to report on mental health consultation status. So they have to report to Congress on, in their SSVF and their GPD case management projects, they have to report on whether or not mental health consultations are being completed, if they've been coordinated or arranged with the VA provider or with another provider, or if participants are just simply declining mental health consultations. So this is a change. This is a quote unquote major change, but it is limited in scope only to SSVF, rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention, and again, the grant per diem, case management, housing retention projects. So this is an element that will be collected on the head of household / veteran, and it will be collected only at project start for these two particular funding components. We've also approved, HUD and their partners have approved some changes to the CSV specifications. So there's a variety of sort of other clarifications that are being made in the notes field throughout. So we're not going to talk through all of these, but some examples are allowing nulls for the grant ID. Really a lot of it's clarifying nulls and clarifying the notes information, not really anything significant other than probably that first one there around changing the HMIS CSV character encoding from the US ASCII minus brackets to UTF-8 minus brackets. This is a change that lots of people have requested over time. This is something that we've talked to the vendors about, and many of the vendors, maybe not many, some of the vendors have already implemented this change. Vendors are certainly permitted to implement this change prior to the go live date of 10/1/2025. They have to have it implemented by 10/1/2025, but they're certainly permitted to do so now or at any point prior to the October 1st deadline. This change is going to enable people and projects with accents or special characters to be accurately included in data transfers and reporting. So that's that. We're also making a change in the HMIS reporting glossary, removing the 3.12 current living situation as an indicator of an active client for night-by-night shelters. This has been something that we've seen quite a few folks submit questions about, ask for this type of change. Because we use bed nights as an indicator of an active client in a night-by-night shelter. So having bed night and current living situation was just more information than was needed. So we are streamlining that and just using the bed nights. So that's it. Those are the only changes that are going into the HMIS data standards for FY 2026. Again, we are very much trying to keep it simple, keep it small, and not make any major changes until 2027. So that's when you'll see the changes around coordinated entry, unsheltered data collection, other bigger changes. Just as a reminder for folks where we sort of are in the timeline, we are here in November. As I mentioned, the changes that we just walked through have all been approved by HUD and the federal partners. So we are all actively working on updating technical documents to release by the end of January, hopefully giving drafts to the vendors by the end of December so that they can review all of those different materials. So we are in the thick of it, making all those updates. This is a much earlier release period for those of you that have been around for a while. Again, we are trying to give vendors as much time to get things done as possible. So they will have their materials several months earlier. We will be releasing the standard sort of suite of materials as well, like back data entry, mapping instructions for the vendors. All of the program manuals that need to be updated will be updated. And we are also, the big manual will be updated. The project setup tool will be updated. We'll do the whole shebang for you. And that's all going to be out in the spring of 2025. We are also, which we've done in the past, but we're continuing to really push the message with vendors that we really would like to see test sites go live by September 1st of 2025. This would enable you to have the information you need to make sure data collection is set up correctly. Excuse me, you can do trainings, whatever you need to do on your end. So as much as possible, we are really very strongly encouraging vendors to have some sort of test site available to their customers at least a month in advance for you all to do the work that you need to do. Okay, I think that's it for me. I'm going to turn it back to Fran, though, to talk about our but why question.
So deep breath, everyone. That was a lot of content, a lot of detailed content, and very important. I do this little but why section. It's lighter and hopefully gives some background into why HUD does the things that HUD does. And so not so technical. So sit back and have a drink of coffee or tea or whatever. So this is sorting out why things may end up in our Ask a Question pool or help desk, which is on the HUD Exchange or hudexchange.info. Why you might ask a question that goes there versus why you might have a question that goes directly to HUD, to a HUD.gov email address. And so what's happened over time is that there's been a real clear bifurcation or separation between what gets answered by folks that support our technical assistance work and those things that are answered by HUD staff. There are things that sit in the domain or in the work of HUD staff that we must do, and those are associated to making policy decisions, things that are maybe it's policy that's not fully defined. Maybe it's policy stuff work that's in development, things that are around rules or notices. And really, it's something that HUD needs to weigh in on and provide feedback to the community. Then we have all of this other stuff that's around technical assistance materials that may have been developed, products, guidance that technical assistance providers can be offering, much more flexible and fluid and I think easier access to get to through the Ask a Question. So very simple, you can submit questions in there and get responses. And so we have an example up here of for the HIC and PIT count, you could submit a question to the AAQ around, something around a tool, a HIC and PIT tool that you might have a question about. And a TA provider then would respond through the AAQ about that tool. But if you had a question about your actual planning process or something about the methodology or something like that, that would actually go to the HIC PIT count at HUD.gov email. Earlier, I talked about engagement with communities around changes in the data elements for the data standards. And I shared with you the survey and also the email. The email I shared with you was HMIS at HUD.gov. So that's another example of a HUD.gov email in which you would utilize because you're giving feedback directly to us or asking us directly something related to policy. So that is the but why, and I will now turn it over. But thank you for your continued attention on the call. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of good technical stuff happening today.
Thanks, Fran. I am actually going to turn it over to Yoreli now to cover our Did You Know?
Thank you. All right, so today's Did You Know is a guide to assessing your HMIS software vendor. And we're basing today's presentation conversation on the lead series product, the HMIS software vendor capacity checklist. We've been trying to highlight a different product in our Did You Know segments over the last few months. So today's is this one, but just know that these products tie hand in hand. And so while we're going to be highlighting today's product, it really goes hand in hand with a lot of the other vendor products. HMIS lead series products about vendors. So keep that in mind. All right, so assessing the COC's HMIS software. Why should you do that? So HUD doesn't prescribe how an HMIS attains compliance with the data and technical standards or other required management and reporting capabilities, but all COCs have to have a governance structure that details who's responsible for monitoring and evaluating the HMIS software. The governance structure is going to vary across COCs, across HMIS implementations, because we know that just in general, COCs are structured differently, have different types of leads. But monitoring and evaluation of the HMIS implementation is generally the responsibility of the COC board, a data committee, or the HMIS lead, or a combination of all of those. And the primary tool that is used to drive compliance and enforce these requirements is the contract with the software vendor. So again, why this ties in hand with other products. What we want to highlight today is how you should use the checklist and who should be at the table. So who should use the checklist? This should be this group that we talked about who's responsible for monitoring and evaluating the HMIS software vendor, the HMIS software and vendor. If you go through this list and your vendor does not meet all the criteria, that does not mean that you should break up with your vendor. There are a lot of different challenges that COCs face. Some of those are internal challenges as it relates to the COC's capacity to oversee the HMIS implementation. Some of those are about the staff capacity at the HMIS lead agency, whether that is the number of staff, the funding, or the skill level. Some of the challenges that may lead to things not being checked off on your checklist could be an overly customized HMIS or providers undervaluing the HMIS. So in other words, that not meeting all the checkboxes doesn't mean it's automatically a vendor issue. It can be an internal issue, and it's up to the COC to work with its vendor, communicating what the COC needs to try to resolve those issues. So what does the checklist evaluate? There are 4 categories that kind of generally all of the checklist pieces fall under: general HMIS requirements, data quality and reporting, technical and security requirements, and then usability and support. The checklist itself is not a measure of compliance. Instead, it is a checklist of what would make the HMIS software meet the needs of the community. So not everything that's on the checklist is something that's in the 2004 technical standards that is a HMIS quote unquote requirement. So I want us to keep that in mind. But it is things that are on the checklist are things that that we've identified that would make for an HMIS software that is user-friendly, accessible. So here under general requirements, you'll see system availability. So you are looking for an HMIS software that is available for the COC to use with limited unplanned downtime, that maintains a backup, a restoration, and has recovery procedures has offsite secure data storage, emergency technical support, a disaster recovery plan. So you'll note that some of these are requirements that are noted in the technical standards, and some of these are things that COC should advocate for. So some of the things that we've been talking about are data collection and integration. So the ability to connect data with other platforms, that's come up with the interoperability conversations. And then a little bit more about in the next section on data quality and reporting, we would as a part of the checklist, there are bullet points or checkboxes that relate to data quality. So ensuring data quality, data accuracy, completeness, and consistency, making sure that there are reporting capabilities that generate HUD compliant reports, ad hoc reports, and a regular data review. So some of the checkboxes under this broad category are the HMI software contains all of the PDDEs and response categories. The HMI software contains all of the UDEs, universal data elements, and the response categories. The software can manage record deduplication via client record merger or some other functionality. There are sufficient protocols in place to prevent a duplication of a client. And the software provides up-to-date HUD required reports like the APR, the LSA, system performance measures, and your CAPR and data quality framework reports. Okay, under technical and security requirements, you're going to be looking for your HMIS software to have system security, provide secure data storage, encryption, and a user authentication process, which includes end-to-end encryption, automatic timeout or lockout, concurrent login prevention, username and password access requirements, SSL certificates. The software can protect data to different federal and local privacy laws as needed, has the ability to archive client data after 7 years. So again, all of this surrounding privacy, confidentiality, and scalability. So allowing the system to grow as needed. So multiple tiered levels of access, things like that. And usability and support. So again, a user-friendly interface, intuitive, easy to navigate for all user levels. Some of the checkboxes under this are offering trainings and supports for local HMIS leads on data entry, workflow, security, privacy, protocols, and reporting. The vendor is timely when feature enhancements, issues, or errors or system bugs are identified. Responding to COC and HMIS leadership questions, issues, or concerns. They provide dedicated customer service representation for the HMIS admins. They have a distinguishable testing environment that mirrors production environment, available for online data entry and real-time data access. So these are, again, some of those things under that category. And once you've gone through the checklist with the body that's responsible for monitoring and evaluating the HMIS software, that checklist, going through that might identify deficiencies in your HMIS or things that could be improved upon. So that could lead to an action plan being created by this committee or board or HMIS lead. Additional communication with the software vendor on areas where your community would like to see improvements. And then ultimately, because there is this one tool that drives that's kind of like your carrot and your stick, right? That drives change. That's going to be a negotiated enhanced contract with the terms and conditions that you identify that were missing from your checklist. Like I said, these lead series documents go hand in hand. Another helpful resource that has been published is the vendor contract management toolkit to assure the vendor is accountable to the COC for following through on the things that they that are in the contract. And that wraps up our assessing your HMIS software and vendor. I think
Thanks,
I've
Shirley.
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely, if you're not familiar with that tool, check it out. Check out all of the lead series products. All those links, I believe, are in the Weebly document. So we are in the home stretch here. Most recent resource links you can see here, the items we've really talked about today that were released in October. Here's all the links to them so that you have those all in one place, plus some other helpful ones that are a little bit older. Our next meeting is set for December 18th. We have concluded our sort of content for the call today. If you want to save your chat, remember now is a great time to do that. Go up to click File in the top toolbar, click Save, and click Chat so that you can get that for your records. I want to say thank you to everyone for being here today. I want to say especially thank you to my co-presenters, Victoria, Juliana, Fran, Ureli, and our team behind the scenes answering questions. So awesome. Really appreciate all of you. And of course, talked to Jesse yesterday. He had this joke as his final contribution of jokes to this call. What works faster than a calculator? A calcu-now. So that seemed like a fitting one, and we're gonna miss Jesse. So thank you all again for your time today. Really appreciate all of you, and hope you have a great rest of your day. This concludes the call.